Welcome to the dansports.tips Daily Fantasy Preview Show for NFL Week 14 on DraftKings. Season comes to an end pretty quick, doesn't it? We will be taking a look today at everything you need for your daily fantasy games on DraftKings this week. We will be looking at offensive stacks, defensive stacks, and players of use at other positions. For any of you out there watching the show that have not been able to sign up and play daily fantasy sports with DraftKings to this point, I will put a link in the description below this video that will enable you to do that and join in the fun today. I'm going to dive straight in with offensive stacks. I'm going to start with the Green Bay Packers. Quarterback Aaron Rodgers for 6,400 and wide receiver Davante Adams for 5,500. Let's make no mistake, weather conditions at frigid Lambeau Field are unlikely to be great on Sunday night. However, with the way the NFC North is shaping up, this game against Seattle is very much a kitchen sink game for the Packers, who absolutely have to have this game. Add in the Earl Thomas injury, there's every chance that Green Bay can experience some success over the middle of the field, which against tight ends and slot receivers is where you can have some success against Seattle. The offense has shown semblances of recovery the last couple of weeks. Adams looks potentially an emerging star despite a quiet game last week against the Houston Texans. The price for these two is lower than usual for an offense with this potential, and people could be scared off by Seattle. It does feel risky, but I certainly think it's worthy of use in at least one lineup this week. The Carolina Panthers, Cam Newton for 7,200 and wide receiver Ted Ginn for $4,000. The Panthers season is pushing up daisies at this point. It's dead and buried. We know that much. So is the San Diego Chargers. Motivation is the hardest thing to project in this matchup. I do trust Ron Rivera to motivate his team to produce one for the home team and the home fans much more than I do Mike McCoy for the Chargers travelling across the country for this game. Cam is the reigning MVP for a reason. He's been the subject of much debate following his early benching for a uniform violation at the start of last week's game. I expect he's going to come out and want to put up a solid performance. And to be honest, amongst his receivers, Benjamin will likely see a lot of Hayward at corner. Greg Olsen's been absent, not worth the price in comparison to other tight end options, which brings me on to Ginn. The stone-handed receiver has touchdowns now in 3 consecutive weeks. He's seen a large target increase amounting to 195 yards receiving over the last 2 games, and he does appear to be the main source of production in the Panthers' offense. Cam may be used, but I'm not sure that many are going to stack Ginn in this stack. So anyone using it, I think you'll have an advantage, to be honest, using this one over anybody else that is stacking Carolina Panthers this week as well. The New York Giants, quarterback Eli Manning for 5,500, wide receiver Odell Beckham for $8,000. We know that Beckham likes to show off in prime time. This is a huge matchup for both teams. It will enable Dallas to lock up the division title or give the Giants a real shot in the race with 2 head-to-head wins over the Cowboys, as they are the only team to have beaten Dallas this season. The weakness of this Cowboys unit is the back end of the defense. The Giants are the polar opposite of Dallas. They have a dearth of talent at the running back position, a complete lack of a run game. As such, they play a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, and Beckham will be fed the ball a lot in this game. I'm certain Manning will be looking for him early and often. Eli as a stack is always a risk, but he is one I'm willing to take against a defense that ranks 27th in pass defense by Football Outsiders DVOA. The Denver Broncos, quarterback Trevor Siemian for 5,100, Emmanuel Sanders for 5,700. Like this stack this week. I watched the Titans game against the Bears prior to their bye week. This means I've seen the Titans defend the pass and understand why they rank only 24th against the pass in DVOA. Ultimately, the Broncos are unable to run the football. Capri Bibbs is now hurt, along with CJ Anderson. Devontae Booker is just not good at football, and they've signed Justin Forsett now, who's been cut on at least 3 occasions this season to run the ball. Simeon, assuming he plays, and I think he's going to, is going to have to throw the ball because of the lack of a run game, and that is where the Titans' defense is at its softest. The Titans do a good job against number 1 receivers. They're ranked 5th in DVOA in that category, and we will call Demaryius Thomas, for the purpose of this preview, the number 1 receiver, despite the fact they're more 1 and 1A, and decide that Emmanuel Sanders is number 2. The Titans rank 30th in DVOA against second receivers. Sanders had a game to forget last week. That hopefully puts people off of him, but that was with Paxton Lynch at quarterback, and I've seen him throw the football as well. I think we can see Simeon bounce back to his best this week. He scored 30 points or more on 2 occasions this week, including his best start the week prior to the injury, which was his second of the 230 DraftKings points games. He's got the potential to do the same in this one, and I think I think it's a sneaky stack that certainly people may use Sanders. I'm not sure many will be pairing him up with Simeon in this game. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, quarterback Jameis Winston for 6,700, wide receiver Mike Evans for 8,900. Nearly left this one off. I mean, Drew Brees had a bad game for New Orleans last week. He doesn't often have 2 games back-to-back, but he has had some issues playing Tampa Bay in the past. The more points the Saints score, obviously the better for us with this stack, as Tampa will have to throw against what is an improving Saints defence in the circumstances that obviously New Orleans score. The Saints are now healthier on the back end. They've improved to 16th in DVOA against the pass. That being said, there are few players in the league that can cover Mike Evans. He is a target monster, the main red zone target for this offense. Evans was very quiet last week against the Chargers, and as such, I'm hopeful that that may put some players off at this price tag, and that's why I am willing to make the stack. He is an excellent play still, having registered double-digit targets in all bar 3 games this season. He has scored multiple touchdowns in a game on 3 occasions as well. Jameis obviously offers upside with the legs against a poor Chargers run defense. Against a poor Saints run defense, and that makes the stack worthwhile. Looking at defensive stacks this week, it's pretty chalky in all honesty. I'm going to take running back David Johnson of the Arizona Cardinals for 9,800. And the Arizona Cardinals defense and special teams for 3,200. The most complete back in football and one of the most consistent sources of points on DraftKings certainty in terms of production is David Johnson. He needs little introduction as a genuine 3-down back. He produces on the ground and as a pass catcher. He faces a Dolphins defense that's below average against the run, ranking 22nd in DVOA, and a hair above average against the pass, ranking 13. He should provide us with usual levels of scoring, which is a high floor. He's managed 27 points in 6 of his last 7 games. The Miami offensive line is hurting with injuries as well, which will add positives for the pass rush in Arizona, pressuring the ineffective Ryan Tannehill. The pass rush in Arizona is much improved with the addition of Chandler Jones in the off-season, upgrading last year's anemic pass rush. They've had decent players in the secondary to take advantage of any Tannehill miscues, which we can reasonably expect. The Dolphins have struggled running the football more so of late. Jay Ajayi has faced more players in the box. He needs Tannehill to be effective throwing the ball to open up some running lanes for him. I don't see that happening this week, and I think both items in this stack have got solid upside and high floors. Quarterbacks this week, I'm going back to the well. I'm going to discard last week Colin Kaepernick of San Francisco for 5,800. It's either brave or it's stupid. I'm going to let you decide. At the end of the day, the Jets are travelling across country on a short week for the game with the 49ers. It's not going to be snowing on the West Coast this weekend, so we can forget the one completed pass and subsequent trip to the bench against the Chicago Bears for Kaepernick last week. Ultimately, he does present bundles of upside in a matchup against the Jets, who look like they've quit on the season. I don't get the feeling from the way the 49ers have played that they have quit. They do seem to be playing hard for Chip Kelly. Kaepernick has the ability to run or pass his way at sufficient points in this one. The Jets defence, certainly against the pass, is dreadful. I think Kaepernick has solid upside in a home game that I think the 49ers may actually register a win. Looking at running backs this week, running back is a solid position this week. I'm going to open up with Le'Veon Bell of the Pittsburgh Steelers for 9,000. The weather is forecast to be pretty bad, with potential for a lot of snow in Buffalo this weekend. Certainly it's going to be freezing cold. Seems like a decent recipe for running the football. Buffalo's defensive unit has struggled somewhat defending the run, ranking 24th in DVOA this year against running backs, and Roethlisberger's numbers have dropped off noticeably in terms of his home road splits this year. Bell remains an elite runner who, with guaranteed production of at least 26 points scored in 4 consecutive games, I think they'll ride their horse all the way to a victory in Buffalo this weekend in Pittsburgh. The running back DeMarco Murray of the Tennessee Titans for $7,000. Murray, off of the bye week, gets to face a Broncos defense that has all sorts of problems against the run. The NFL's second rusher has rested his injured foot by all accounts during the bye week. He's good to go and carry the load for the Titans, who have stated all year long the desire to run the football down their opponent's throats, and they have lived up to that. The only concern I do have is that Tennessee do tend to score more touchdowns through the air than on the ground, suggesting that maybe Murray has limited upside due to a propensity to throw the football in the red zone by Mariota. Could be unwise against this defensive unit that is terrible against the run. And that's the main worry really for DeMarco Murray this week, but I still think he has a high floor because he's going to get work and he's going to gain yards against this defense. Matt Forte of the New York Jets for 6,800. There is no doubt the Jets looked about as bad as possible on Monday night, and that's both a positive and negative for Forte in this matchup. He saw only 9 carries as the Jets fell behind to the Colts early, so could well be reasonably well rested with the cross-country journey on a short week, which we're going to need in that circumstance. There is also a chance, due to the Jets performance that Forte will be lower owned than he should be against what is a terrible San Francisco run defense that gave up yards in bunches to Jordan Howard in Chicago last week, which is in line with their performance for the rest of the season. In all honesty, they're ranked 32nd against the run by DVOA. They will start Bryce Petty this week at quarterback, so they could well be looking to lean on the running game of Forte and Bilal Powell to ease the pressure on the young quarterback. Running back Lamar Miller of the Houston Texans for 5,100, is always going to feel risky. He's one of the more disappointing players in fantasy football this year. This was meant to be the year for Miller. He finally got the chance as a workhorse back in an offense that wants to run the ball. The issue's been Brock Osweiler has been so bad that the Texans cannot move the ball through the air. Teams don't respect the passing game, so he sees a loaded box time and again, and as such a low yards per carry and points total week after week. It is hard to imagine him being hugely owned coming off a week last week where he scored 2.8 DraftKings points with a paltry 22 yards on 14 carries. The Colts defense is not good against the run, highlighted by Miller's best performance of the season so far against these Indianapolis Colts when they first met in week 6, where he put up a yards per carry number over 6 and almost 150 yards with 2 touchdowns, scoring 35 DraftKings points. That's the sort of upside we're talking about that is going to make him worth including in some lineups this week, particularly at what is a low price for a running back of $5,100. And finally, Jeremy Hill of the Cincinnati Bengals for $5,800. Hill's price has now started to increase to a number more in line with his expected workload, with Giovanni Bernard done for the season. He has upside against a Cleveland Brown unit that is pretty horrid across the board, and unless we forget, he had a 74-yard touchdown run in the first game against them this season on his way to a 30 fantasy point day and almost 170 yards that day, and that was prior to the injury of Bernard. He should see more work this week. Jordan Matthews at wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's $5,400 this week. Matthews is the rarity of a primary receiver on a team that plays mainly in the slot. That keeps him away from the outside corners, which are an area of strength for this Washington Redskins pass defense. Playing in the slot should afford Matthews, assuming he's healthy after he's inactive last week, plenty of opportunity and volume in a game that both teams need to win if they want to remain in the hunt for a wild card. And the likelihood is that Washington are going to score some points, and as such, Wentz, who has fallen off of a cliff somewhat in the second half of the season, is more likely to air the ball out more in this game. I think Matthews should see plenty of volume. Deshaun Jackson in the same game for the Washington Redskins at 5,200. On the other side of this matchup, he's for a number of years has been what we would call boom or bust when it comes to fantasy football, and it's almost impossible to predict. But he does have a decent matchup this week. He should see plenty of Leodis McKelvin, who has been beaten deep on a number of occasions by a variety of receivers this year. This is a week where it is worth putting Jackson in some lineups. I think there is upside there. He could well have at least 1 or 2 long gains and maybe a big touchdown catch as well. I wouldn't want to stack him due to his own volatility. With Kirk Cousins, if he was more predictable, obviously it'd be a great stack, but I certainly think Deshaun Jackson is worthy of a look this week. Taylor Gabriel of the Atlanta Falcons for 4,300. I left him out last week. The matchup was poor. We put him up the week before that when he had a very good game. It's time to jump back on board Gabriel this week. He's exactly the sort of player to take advantage of the Rams linebackers, who are a weakness in coverage. We saw his blazing speed 2 weeks ago in Arizona when he did score 26 points for us when he was highlighted on the show. The tough assignment last week hopefully will put some people off as we jump back on. With the expected absence of Mohamed Sanu for the Falcons and a banged up Julio Jones as well, there is potentially even more volume to be had this week than there was last week, 2 weeks ago against those Arizona Cardinals. My final wide receiver is Dontrell Inman of the San Diego Chargers for 4,800. Inman has quietly been the most consistent option in the Chargers passing attack in recent weeks, and as the Chargers are likely to be behind in this matchup and also needing to throw to exploit the weak Carolina Panthers secondary, I've got high expectations for Inman this week. After finding the end zone in each of the last 2 weeks and leading the team in targets last week, Travis Benjamin for the Chargers is banged up. He has been active, he's been on the field, largely used as a decoy. I'm expecting that to continue this week, and that should continue the uptick that we've seen in the performance of Inman over the last few games. Tight ends this week, Tyler Eifert of Cincinnati for $6,000. The Browns are quite simply the Browns. As with most of their defensive unit, they are not good. good. They struggle with tight ends, ranking 31st against the position. A Bengals offense that sprang to life last week in the destruction of a solid Eagles pass defensive unit now gets to face Cleveland without top receiver AJ Green. So Green is their best target. Eifert is probably second on that list. He could well feast in this matchup and is worth paying big dollar in the position this week. Slightly cheaper option, Cameron Brate of Tampa Bay for 4,100. Brate's a secondary red zone option for the Buccaneers in a game that certainly at first look appears to have a lot of points in it. I've got reservations if it'll be as high as some people are expecting, but the Saints are not good against the tight end either. They rank 24th in DVOA against the position. This position's been decimated with many of its top options due to injury and poorer than expected levels of performance this year. Brate has eclipsed 20 points in 2 of his last 4, and he could have a good day again this week against the New Orleans Saints at home. And finally, defense this week, Minnesota Vikings, 3,900. This isn't rocket science. They are the top priced defense for a reason. They face Blake Bortles, who at this stage is a walking turnover. The Vikings defense has the highest scoring in terms of defensive touchdowns due to their ability to create turnovers. They're also sitting 4th in the NFL in sacks. There's a lot of upside with a lot for the Vikings this week, in a category with a lot of middling options, really, defence and special teams this week. That is what I've got for you this week. Best of luck with your lineups. Don't forget to like the video. Please do subscribe to my channel. As I say, I'm here every week through the NFL season. Follow me on Twitter at dansports.tips. Please do tweet me any successful lineups where I've been able to help you out. Let me know in the comments who you're using in your lineups, anyone you think I've missed that I should have put up on the show this week, and I will see you next week.